This is a lightning talk, DevSecOps with Imran. Imran, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is one aspect of DevSecOps, which is how you automate the compliance aspect of it, which is probably the final frontier, according to me, because people have already started automating SaaS, DAST, IST, RASP, and whatnot. But then people still worry about, can we really automate compliance? So this talk sheds a bit of light. Of course, this is just 20-minute talk, lightning talk, so I cannot go more into it. So let's go right in. And so yeah, thank you once again joining in this session today. Right, Wallaby, I'm good to go, right?
You are.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So as mentioned by Wallaby again, I'm Imran. I'm the founder of a company called Practical DevSecOps. We do DevSecOps consulting and training and also certification. And we do regularly speak at different conferences like Black Hat, of course, Open Security Summit here and whatnot. So I do know a little bit about DevSecOps. So here I am sharing what I think we need to be doing in continuous auditing or automating compliance aspect of DevSecOps. So you might have come across this survey where about only 8% of the respondents of this ECG survey say that they are not securing their DevOps or just any infrastructure with the help of DevSecOps practices or in DevOps, right? And within 2 years, they are expecting it to ramp up to 68%. So it's very difficult to someone go from 0 to 75 or 68% here, as you can see there. So they are trying to now secure 75 or more % of their application using DevSecOps. So as I mentioned before, we do see some maturity in the world, especially in the DevOps transformation, that people are willing to put security as part of CI/CD. So we are not at the beginning of this digital transformation, but there's still some complaints about, can we really automate compliance? Is it really necessary? Would it add value? Or would I become obsolete if I do automate compliance, right? Those are a couple of questions which people have. So what I want to show you is a quick demo on how you can automate the security or even compliance aspect of as part of DevSecOps. As you can see here, we have a pipeline which just finished about like 10-20 minutes ago. And you can see I do have a pipeline which has a lot of scans in it. You have Git secret scanning here, SCA, static analysis, and then again, backend or the front end SCA. Then you also have container scanning here. And then here during the integration phase, we are also making sure the SSL baselines are satisfied for my staging or production environment. And then we are also running some application like Zap. Right? And finally, we are doing hardening and then compliance. So right now, I'm calling it prod, but it's in fact a staging environment. So you can see here, I'm definitely doing hardening of the staging environment to make sure it's hardened. And then we are also checking to ensure this stays compliant over its, hold on, yeah. So throughout its life cycle. So as you can see here, we did harden this infrastructure and you can see everything is fine and then job succeeded, which means that we were managed to successfully harden the infrastructure. Now, one complaint, as I mentioned before, people really talk about is that, oh, you know what, the DevSecOps is amazing. Security people, especially application security, network security aspect of security, they are automating it. But you know what? We as compliance folks, we don't really know how to code. What about us? And that's the usual pushback I usually get from our customers or clients when we do show them, hey, you know what? You can definitely automate compliance. And as you can see, the demo gods are not with me today. So hold on a minute. I want to show you a quick demo. Okay, there you go. So if you do automate compliance as well, as you can see, it can quickly check to ensure the hardening stays the same throughout its life cycle. So imagine, one of the aspects of DevOps is try to create your infrastructure, which is pretty ephemeral, meaning it doesn't change during its lifetime, right? And that's why we see these days an average age of a container in an orchestrated scenario is just 12 hours. Now, trying to harden it and then trying to make it compliant across the infrastructure is a really, really big challenge. So unless you automate using DevSecOps practices, it's very difficult to keep up. Right? So we'll see why that's a challenge in a couple of minutes as well. As you can see here, we ran about 110 control checks on this infrastructure, which is a typical Linux environment here. And then among these, 9 failed even after hardening it, right? There could be various reasons why we are not completely hardening, especially SE Linux comes to mind. People usually set it default to 0, which means that do not enforce it, right? Even though that was there designed to help you secure it. But since it's very difficult to manage, difficult to scale across the infrastructure, sometimes people just end up disabling it, right? So even with that kind of setups, we can still gain a lot of value if we automate compliance, right? So let's look at some of the other pushbacks we get. So as I really proved you here, and it just takes 1 minute and 27 seconds here for the system. And this entire pipeline you see here just took about 10 minutes, give and take. So we are, and I'm not running just one test. I'm running a bunch of tests here: static analysis, dynamic analysis, container security, SCA, and bunch of dynamic analysis scans. So you can see we can really, really do automate compliance if you want to. Again, without knowing a lot of coding and having any coding experience or developer experience. We'll look into that. Why am I saying that? All right. So that's the example I showed you on how we can really gain value if we automate compliance. Right. So this is a traditional model, which really doesn't work. So since we already know what is DevSecOps, I'm going to skip it and then talk about what are the common pushbacks I really get when it comes to automating security or compliance, right? People, first off, they say, okay, you know what? People are doing DevOps, but really the security team doesn't need to be in DevOps. That's the first pushback I usually get. But sad reality, as we have seen, is where security is outnumbered. It's usually 500 to 1 ratio, which means for every 500 developers, probably there's 1 security engineer. And that ratio is even worse if you are from a GRC background. Some organizations it's better, but then you can even say for every 10 security engineers, AppSec, network security, traditional security, there probably could be 1 or 2 GRC folks or compliance folks, right? Risk management folks. Now, if we don't do that, right? If we don't follow the best practices of DevOps, either the DevOps team wouldn't want to work with us, that's going to happen, or we would be just pushed to the side and we will not be involved in the day-to-day activities. And if you're not involved in day-to-day activities, then it becomes really, really difficult to keep up with the pace of DevOps. As we know that some organizations are pushing code to production every 9 seconds, which means they might also be pushing vulnerabilities every 9 seconds. And probably they're also updating some aspects of infrastructure that can lead to being non-compliant to some regulations, best practice, or some rule, right? Now, other myth I usually have is high reliance on tools. They say, okay, you know what? Oh, we're going to just buy that $1 million tool and just embed into the pipeline, and we will automatically become compliant to whatever compliance. And unfortunately, you cannot automate 100% of compliance. There's people aspect of compliance, there's processes aspects of compliance. Maybe we can automate technology aspect of it, but then 60 to 70% can be realistically automated, rest of them cannot be. So relying again a lot on tools will not give you full benefits. The people, process, technology has to work together, and in that order. People first, processes, and then technology, right? And then another myth we usually see in the wild is, oh, this is a new fancy tool, we should just buy it and then it automatically transforms all our projects or the whole organization into a DevSecOps shop. Okay, not going to happen if that's what you're trying to do. And then, as we mentioned before, right, it's very difficult, literally impossible to automate 100% of whatever it is, pen testing, compliance, whatever that is, right? Even though we have tools, but again, not possible. So if you're in that bucket thinking, oh, we can automate everything, sorry, that's not how it's going to work. So again, these are a couple of aspects which we need to talk about. This again ties down to people, process, and technology. The culture is probably the least appreciated or least worked on aspect of DevSecOps. But if you don't work on this, everything else falls on its knees. Similarly, automation, measurement, and sharing. If you're not using developer tooling or the tooling which DevOps team use to probably share the audit issues or security issues, you're not going to reap benefits. And a quick win here is if you do push, probably, let's say, take an example, Jira, if that's the bug tracking system you're using and you push the audit issues in there instead of a big Excel sheet, which is tossed around across the organization, then your mean time to fix a vulnerability or an audit issue goes down anywhere from 2 months to just a couple of minutes, because then you are providing developers right information at right time with right context. So that's, and we have seen this. It's not like I'm speaking out of a book or fancy book. Again, the culture probably is the least appreciated aspect of DevSecOps. If you don't work on it, everything else just doesn't work, right? And then this is another misconception or a myth among security team, that everything should be, we should be the gatekeepers. And if no one has taken approval from us, probably it should not go to production. But then in DevOps, right, DevOps wants to push to production every probably 9 seconds, very often, but security, want to keep everything safe, secure. So we are now trying to do two different things in two different tangents. So we are at a polar opposite. We are at the opposite poles usually, and then if we don't collaborate, we are just going to end up fighting, and then DevOps team will do whatever they are supposed to do, and they'll just create a shadow ID or something of that sort, and you will just deal with that IT aspect of it. So this is another myth we have to solve before we can really automate compliance aspect of it. So in short, try to build bridges, not walls. Try to create guardrails, not gates. Traditionally, when we started doing secure SDLC, there was a lot of emphasis on creating gates, especially Microsoft SDLC model did say about these are the gates. Right now, that doesn't hold true, because at the speed at which people are going, it's really impossible to keep in a lot of gates. So if your pipeline doesn't finish within 10 to 15 minutes, then probably you shouldn't put that security test as part of CI/CD pipeline, right? And then some people do assume that, okay, you know what, our team is doing agile or CI/CD pipeline. Probably we don't have to integrate as part of that pipeline. We will create another pipeline just for security test or compliance test. Guess what? You will just become a build engineer rather than a security engineer. Your whole life would be just trying to fix or keep up with what developer team is doing in their repositories. So again, not a bad idea, shouldn't be doing it. And agile is definitely needed, at least a CI/CD pipeline before you can reap benefits of compliance as code. Right, so this is what I would explain it, similar thing in pictorial format. But then, as I mentioned, if you really want to scale the compliance efforts, we have to do at least these things. And one among them is everything as code. So even compliance can be done as code. So compliance as code, security as code, hardening as code, configuration as code, and whatnot. And this will help us do the shift left, self-service, make everything secure by default, and then fit nicely with your security champions program, because they will now have visibility on what's going on in your infrastructure. And if I change this lever, what's going to happen and what's going to be its side effects. Not possible always, but definitely something to work on. All right. Now, when I say this, that, hey, you can really automate compliance, people say, are you kidding, Imran? Probably you might have drunk something and you still have a hangover or some sort. But to be really honest, you can do it, right? And development teams have already, DevOps team have already embraced this philosophy of everything as code. And then we typically see this platforms like Amazon, GCP, they allow you to do infrastructure as code. And then we also have these fancy tools like Terraform, CloudFormation, and whatnot to help you instantiate infrastructure on the cloud. And we also have the tools like open source tools like Ansible, Salt, and whatnot to help you configure or harden your infrastructure as code, right? So this is what we call infrastructure as code. But if you really have to do infrastructure as code, you need three things, as you can see on the screen. You need platform, a way to define the application, the server entities itself, and then finally to configure it according to some compliance aspect of it. So we need these three. When people talk about infrastructure as code, they are talking about these three things. And if you don't have even one of these, then it doesn't really work end to end. So it's very, very important that we use these things. And then some people also call as creating a golden image, which basically using infrastructure as code mechanisms to create a hardened image, and then everyone else uses that as a baseline for the rest of the work, right? And then so this is your infrastructure as code, this is configuration as code, and then the final frontier or the final aspect of this in shifting left and also shifting right simultaneously is security as code. So we also have to, as a security team, learn how to do everything as code. And guess what? You can use exact same tools which your DevOps team is using to do hardening. What do I mean by that? Configuring it securely. Example, Ansible. You can use Ansible to provision infrastructure according to your DevOps needs. You can use the same Ansible script to harden your infrastructure, right? Same goes for Chef, Inspect, and Puppet, and any configuration management system. Now, there are tools in the market which can really do compliance as well and make sure these you're not configuring, you're not opening up your security groups to the world or not opening your S3 buckets to the world. So you can definitely, all of that can be done while the scripts are still being created using static analysis tool. Check OV is a good tool there. Bridge Crew has a couple of them as well there, right? Now, why compliance is final frontier? Because the definition of compliance says this is the fact. The compliance is a noun and it's a fact of obeying a particular law. Unfortunately, usually compliance is a one snapshot of your compliance activities in organization. Maybe you're compliant now, probably down the line 2 days from now, you're not compliant, probably. So in fact, this is probably not a fact anymore because it's not always true. It's just a snapshot of you being compliant. Especially in DevOps world, right? Because as average age of a CI/CD container is just 12 hours. So it's very difficult to keep up with the phase of DevOps if you're not automating it, right? And then we're also making sure that it stays compliant. So this, when you're using continuous tense, it means it was compliant, it is going to be compliant, and it will be compliant. So we all know how much there's a truth to this thing, especially when it comes to compliance, right? And then the usual pushback when we say automate compliance is that, Imran, I'm a GRC guy. I don't know how to code. And to be very honest, when people say compliance as code, security as code, hardening as code, policy as code, they are simply saying just bunch of YAML files as code. And you might be laughing at the definition, but if you look at the code, right? Look at Ansible, it's just bunch of YAMLs. Look at Terraform, YAML, all of these files are just simple files. And you don't even have to code it. If you can understand plain, simple English, you can automate compliance. That's how it is. And if you still have any reservations about it, take help of your security team. If not, hire an intern. If not, just take help of someone else. It's not very difficult. And I believe you have to learn to code at least some aspect, even writing simple scripts, if you have to be a part of a security team in near future. Eventually, we will not have these different teams like InfoSec team, AppSec team, compliance team. They might just become one team. They will be more like generalists rather than specialists, right? So that's where the industry is heading, what I see in the industry. So again, don't be afraid of trying to automate compliance without you knowing anything about coding. It's very easy, bunch of text files put together, run together. And good news is 80% of your job is already done by these automated tools. So you can just use these, like dev-sec is a very interesting topic there. Like there's a nice framework, and this provides lots of inspect profiles which satisfy some compliance aspects. Then Ansible as well. Okay, so there's lot to this, I think. But what I will do is, what I wanted to bring attention to you about this is that everything can be converted to code, especially security, and more so compliance. So it can also be automated with just a couple of working for a couple of days probably. Yeah? And it hardly takes, as I said, a couple of minutes to check on a regular basis, right? I think that's it for now. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer that for you.
Man, I think this was a great presentation. Definitely, one of those required viewing, and you managed to condense it for 15 minutes, which is great. And that everything code goes close to my heart. I got in trouble a lot by saying you have to code to the security, right? So it's
Yeah.
great. That's adopted. There's a couple of questions on the chat. So
Mhm.
could you take a look at it? I'm going to have to jump because I need to go into the other session, but you guys can
Sure,
stay
sure.
here as long as you want. And remember that this is recorded, right? So in a way, you're just creating a nice asset that we can then keep sharing and collaborating. But just there's a couple of
Sure.
questions on the chat. So read them, and then if you answer them, and when you guys ready.
Okay.
Okay.
So the question was that what are some of the coding skills that you would recommend a DevOps engineer pick up, right? So if you don't know, anything about coding, pick up, Python, probably the easiest language you have. And there are other alternatives like Golang if that's something of interest to you. But, at least you need to know how to parse a JSON output, an XML output, and then consume it to do something, maybe push it to a Jira or a version control system or whatnot. And then apart from that, you also have to know a bit about Git. And then you don't have to be an expert at it, like how do you resolve merge conflicts and whatnot. You only have to know a couple of commands like git add, git push, git pull, probably git commit. If you know a handful of these things, then it's more than enough for you to really get into everything as code. It looks scary, and I know 90% of the security people who are in the network side of stuff, they got into security because they probably hated the coding, or they don't like coding. But fact is, software is eating the world, and if you don't pick up these skills, probably it will eat us as well, security teams. Again, it's a debatable topic, but I personally believe that's the case. That's where we are heading as an industry. Bash, yes, but then you could probably do, same thing in Python with a couple of lines, which might take probably like 10% more code to do it. So Bash, yes, but in a real world scenario, Python really comes handy. And then you look at the tooling. Most of security tooling is in Python. We are moving to Golang, but you look at Ansible, it's in Python. You look at a bunch of other tools, DevOps tools. They are both in Python or Golang. Pick up any of these, you wouldn't go wrong. Yes, definitely, that's that. Is it possible to integrate privacy into DevSecOps? Yes, possible. Just like how we have OWASP, ASVS, an amazing project. People at some of the European universities are working on something called Linden. It's a privacy framework. So that can be embedded as part of your CI/CD pipeline or as part of your functional and non-functional requirements. That will help you automate some aspect of it using BDD kind of a methodology. But again, it's not yet available to every person at the moment. Some people are doing it. Again, not possible to, as I said, automate 100% of it. Sure. Is it possible to get these slides? Yes, I'm going to put it into the slide share, and then I'll share the link. And also, I guess I will share it with the organizers as well. I hope that answers your question.
I think there was one more about bash scripting. I don't know if you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, right? Bash is good. I don't have any problems with it. But then Python is more powerful when it comes to munging the information, taking the information, converting into a different format. And most of the organization is anyway using. And apart from making sure the language you use is used by most of your team, you also have to make sure is it easy to use by rest of the team, right? So I know some of the security engineers that really hate Golang for whatever reason. I don't know. Similarly, some people think Bash is good, but then Python is more powerful. You might have seen that graphic of Python. You just say import gravity and you're flying in the sky. So I think there's some truth to it. But yeah, you can always debate about it. So you pick up any programming language, a functional programming language, really helps in automating some aspects of DevSecOps.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We definitely
Thank you.
appreciate it. And you can see his information there if anyone wants to be able to ask more questions later. SecFigo. Yeah,
Yep,
thank you.
great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this opportunity.